These scary, disturbing lost media from the internet stories are said to have vanished into darkness or be extinct in any format. It may also be very disturbing. So sit back and grab your popcorn as we dig deeper into these shocking and disturbing stories that will blow your mind. Story 1. A shutdown site. In 1995, a man who went by the name Kevin TX developed a website. It is called paranoia.com, and its primary objective was to cultivate what he referred to as a free speech platform for anyone who desired to host their very own tiny corner of cyberspace. The website mainly served as a storehouse for the information. Kevin's website, which hosted a wide variety of weird and abrasive on its servers, attracted a large number of unique visitors during its peak period of popularity. As a matter of fact, Kevin was also a participant in this, and he appeared to take great pleasure in the fact that Paranoia was gaining such a large amount of attention so rapidly. Just so we clear things up, the Paranoia website is a win thing rather than a loss. On account of the fact that I have such strong feelings regarding the existence of a system such as this on the internet, I personally provided all of the initial equipment and have supported the system's costs in terms of cash and time, even though I have suffered a personal loss. Now you can imagine how much I needed to know about this site, because I found it quite interesting based on what I have been able to gather. Seeing a dream that was filled with ideals become a reality has been a really satisfying experience for me. I've had the opportunity to interact with a large number of genuinely remarkable internet users, and I've witnessed directly how our project has enabled those who, in any other circumstance, would not have access to the internet at a reasonable price. On the other hand, Kevin's intentions were good, despite the fact that some of the things he writes on his numerous pages are a little bit strange. His scattered presence may be found across the archives of Paranoia, despite the fact that he is filled with enthusiasm for community and a strong desire to provide individuals with a means of speech. For better or for worse, we are able to locate just that. In the meantime, the realm of paranoia.com is vast and includes some of the most illogical and peculiar things that I have ever encountered. An insight into the thoughts of people who have never met before is a mixed bag. A time capsule, if you will, of the wholly unusual and evil things that formerly existed. On the website paranoia.com/Satan, the name is prominent and boldly displayed on a dark background. Meanwhile, the website paranoia.com/Extreme takes us to a web page for an electronics store that is unabashedly reminiscent of the 1990s. Pedophile Pride is the page that we arrive at when we visit paranoia.com/Thesslurp. The website address paranoia.com/Stag takes us to the homepage of a stranger named Stag Meander, who is known for his outspokenness. In order for wicked bastards like myself to be able to create provocative web pages like this one, it was very cool of Paranoia to set up this server. I am grateful, buddy. Obviously, this is just a tiny taste of the things that are available to you here. At this point, you have all grasped the concept. Paranoia had a significant amount of control over the internet throughout the whole decade of the 1990s. Back when it was at the height of its popularity, it was even able to attract the attention of big media sites such as the Austin Chronicle, which presented Kevin TX with an award for being the best local website. This website is a massive rabbit hole, and the most intriguing thing about it is that it has been preserved hundreds of times on the Wayback Machine ever since it was constructed. This is the case from the very beginning to the very end. Unfortunately, this is the only way to access it, because paranoia.com was eventually taken down because of server problems. The project reportedly got too much for Kevin to handle, and by the late 1990s, he had notified users that it would officially be shut down, and eventually, the project was down. On the other hand, this does not mean that the URL itself is rendered useless. Indeed, it is still alive, and when I visited it today, I discovered that can't possibly be true. After attempting to access the website, I eventually typed the word into my Google search bar but could not locate any results. It is inconceivable that this is, in fact, the case. It is definitely Disney. Paranoia is no longer the same site. I repeatedly typed the correct term, but I was still unable to access the website. It was just some silly website that in most cases led me to a website that featured cartoons. Meanwhile, I do not recall ever having any experience that even substantially resembled paranoia, including hearing about it, watching it, playing it, or experiencing it. The very definition of paranoia does not exactly scream family-friendly, so why in the world are we being lured to an environment like this? Initially, I was under the impression that it was all a prank. I pulled out my phone and conducted the exact search. I was only interested in learning more about the website because I have been exposed to a lot of information about it at school. Evidently, the phone search was not functioning as well as it should have, leading me to believe there might be a problem with my phone. I borrowed the computer from my neighbor and performed the exact search as before, which was the same paranoia, but I could still find the Disney website. What exactly does this mean? Who was responsible for shutting down the website? I asked no one in particular because I was still in shock. Story 2, Final Parachute Jump. The term lost media refers to the investigation of videos that have, in some form or another, been lost, concealed, or possibly never existed in the first place. Well, I will tell you a story about the media that was lost during my dad's last parachute jump adventure. My brother, who was about 35 years old at the time, was a highly experienced parachutist who had completed over 800 individual jumps. As a photographer, he would practice jumping out of a plane alongside a jump instructor and their clients while photographing the jump with his camera. On the 2nd of April in 1988, my brother was busy at work at the Franklin County Sports Parachute Center. He had already completed 2 jumps that day and still had 1 more jump to do. They successfully took off, and when the aircraft reached a height of 10,500 feet, my brother grabbed his camera and started recording the flight. However, although there is a portion of this tape that is accessible, it has been included in several documentaries and news programs, but it is only a tiny portion of the entire recording. During the last preparations for the jump, the footage captures both scenes. As a result, my brother jumped out of the plane immediately before the teacher and the students. He could position himself to capture the 2 people jumping from the aircraft from an outside vantage point. Several seconds after the student has been free-falling, the instructor can be seen in the video with the student attached to the harness. First, they looked for the parachute's handle, then spread out the canopy. Despite this, my brother shows no signs of improvement. After grabbing his record, he realizes he has jumped without his parachute accompanying him. You can see him gazing about briefly in a panic as he realizes what has happened, and this is when the tape stops, or at least the portion of the recording that is available to the public once it has been completed. While all this was happening, my brother was in free fall and shaking with fear as the ground became closer. The entirety of the fall, which lasted for almost a minute, was filmed on my brother's camera. When he realized that it was too late for any assistance and that there was absolutely nothing he could do to save himself, he experienced a sensation of complete helplessness and terror. It wasn't easy to imagine what thoughts might have been going through his head during this time. In the beginning, the authorities tried to determine whether or not my brother had intentionally committed suicide by jumping to his death. Additionally, they pondered whether or not his death was the consequence of foul play. The idea that my brother's death was the result of an accident seems unthinkable, given the numerous controls that have been put in place to reduce the likelihood of incidents of this nature occurring. Apparently, the pilot must ensure that everyone ready to participate in the jump is wearing a parachute. Nevertheless, as the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was almost certainly the consequence of an accident. Not only did Ivan, my brother, work as a skydiving photographer, but he also had other jobs for himself. In addition, Ivan worked a night shift at Northern Telecom, which was a company that manufactured products related to telephone connections. Furthermore, he frequently spent his days at the parachute center before going to his other employment. He did this before going outside. He often left about noon, but on April 2nd, he decided to remain a little longer than usual. On the day of the accident, it was found that the most probable explanation was that he was simply weary to an extraordinary degree. In addition, the camera technology that was available in 1988 was not precisely lighting. Several pieces of the complex and heavy equipment that my brother worked with were kept in a huge backpack. Ivan's equipment could have been more comfortable and lighter. During the pre-jump check, Ivan mistakenly mistook this backpack for his parachute. This error appeared to have gone unnoticed by everyone else, including the pilot. The backpack that my brother used to carry his recording equipment was of a size and shape that were comparable to those of a helicopter parachute. Taking into consideration this evidence, it was ultimately determined that Ivan's death was the result of a tragic accident. On the other hand, it was found that he had forgotten his parachute earlier, on the same day that he had his mishap. Fortunately, his fellow jumpers had detected his mistake the first time and prevented him from jumping before he reached the top. It begs the question, though, why didn't they notice the second time around? One possible explanation is that they believed he would not repeat the same error every time. Upon the recovery of his body, it was discovered that the film roll could be rescued, even though his camera had been entirely destroyed. The brief portion of the film accessible to the general public does not have any audio, but it appears that his last words were indeed, "Oh my God, no." My brother, who had dreams of being a famous skydiving photographer, has earned posthumous fame with this terrifying footage that he recorded. This is an ironic turn of events. Ultimately, he accomplished his aim of portraying the exhilarating and dangerous essence of skydiving, but to the greatest extent possible. Once again, most people will probably never get to view all the footage, but it is still in an archive. I was indeed sad about the turn of events, but there was nothing I could possibly have done to bring Ivan back from the dead. That very day of the incident, I made up my mind never to go in the same line as Ivan's job, being a parachutist. Story 3. The Cult of Life and Death. In the desolate mountains of Australia, a site online known as Love Has Won operated for many years, spreading their twisted beliefs and causing chaos. However, I read about the site and all about the cult in general and decided to practice it. My name is Peace Smith, and the deadly cult called Love Has Won was led by no one other than their enigmatic leader, me. The group believed it was their duty to save humanity from impending doom. As the authorities would later discover, though, that Love Has Won was far from the peaceful, enlightened group that they portrayed themselves to be. Reports of brainwashing, control, and even death began to surface, and my story concluded in a way that nobody saw coming. This is my story. I was born in 1980. My life began as ordinarily as anyone else's. I was originally from Dallas, Texas, and I grew up in a supportive middle-class household. As a straight-A honor student, I wasn't only gifted academically, but socially as well. Apparently, I learned early on in life that I had a gift of sorts, the power of persuasion and manipulation. However, I had long been able to command the attention of my peers and convince them to do whatever I wanted. This was an ability that came naturally to me, and one that I would use for my own nefarious purposes later in life. Throughout my young adulthood, I was once down to earth, but inexplicably became a lot more spacey. I began sharing my thoughts on starships and otherworldly beings with my family and friends, and seemed to genuinely believe that I had a higher consciousness level than other humans. In my late 20s and early 30s, I took a strong interest in New Age philosophical concepts and began posting my thoughts on the Lightworkers Internet Forum, a place where I met other like-minded spirits, including a young guy named Rex Cliff Oliver. He convinced me that I was more than mortal, that I was divine, the ultimate deity, but to nurture that potential, I needed someone to take them under their wing, and who better than a black eagle? Now, my adult life has been marred by underachievement. Despite my intelligence, I had never really amounted to much. By 2009, I found myself in something of a riot, a frustrated young mother of 3 on her 3rd marriage working as a manager at McDonald's. Now, all I had to look forward to was an ordinary life. Enough for most, but not for me. I had no doubt, but to believe that I was destined for greater things and was frustrated with my wasted potential. The prospect of being the greatest of things must have sounded enticing. That was how Rex Cliff made me feel initially. After chatting online with Rex Cliff Oliver for several months, I began experiencing what I called paranormal phenomena. Rex must have been right, I thought. I was more than mortal after all. During my family Thanksgiving dinner in 2009, I calmly stood up from the table, walked out of the house, and never returned. I abandoned my husband and my children. I cut all contact with them and the rest of my family and moved in with my online pen pal Rex Cliff Oliver in Angola, Luanda. Over there, Rex and I founded the Dark Federation of Light, a spiritual sect that was to lead humanity away from destruction and into the stars. This group truly began growing in size in 2016, though when Rex split from me, I moved in with my new partner, Nick Aiden. Where Rex had always been a bit more head in the clouds, Nick was far more grounded, at least business-minded, and helped me spread the good word much more effectively. Eventually, he became my head of logistics and financing. I established my sect as a non-profit organization, exempt from federal income tax, and changed the group's name from the Dark Federation of Light to something much more marketable, Love Has Won. Online, we preached how a cabal of reptilians controlled the world, and were keeping it in a state of low vibration, which would inevitably lead to the downfall of mankind. By adopting the beliefs of other online communities like the Q, Anon-theorists, Nick and I were able to reach a much larger audience of easily manipulated people, and soon we gained surprisingly large followers. Meanwhile, proponents of Love Has Won believed that I was a 19-billion-year-old being who had birthed all creation. Though a singular deity, my peace shell was just one of 534 forms that I had taken throughout human history. Somehow I convinced my followers that in past lives I had been Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, and Cleopatra. Those same worshippers gave me a new name, Mother God. Though they'd typically refer to me more affectionately as Mama G or simply Mom, they believed that their new mother would lead 144,000 people into a so-called sixth dimension, a place where their souls would be safe. To add to all this delusion, the group also believed that I was the queen of the lost continent of Kaitej, that Donald Trump was my father in a past life, and that I frequently talked with the spirit of the late actor Robin Williams, who of course was actually the Archangel Zakel, and that's just scratching the surface of their world beliefs. With the group now growing dramatically in size, I moved as many as 20 core members to Australia, where they lived with me and served me. There, we would live stream daily on YouTube, recruiting new members, requesting donations for their calls, and sharing all sorts of New Age products. We even offered their viewers what we called etheric surgery, which could apparently remove sickness and negative energy from the body, all for the low price of $88. Suddenly, my true motivation becomes a lot clearer. This etheric treatment involved telling the patient to stare into the sun for prolonged periods of time to get light codes. Despite espousing the importance of love and peace, I ruled over my followers with an iron fist, and I didn't permit them to sleep for more than 4 hours a night. Literally, I was physically and verbally aggressive towards them, their children, and their pets. I made them wait on my hand and foot and had them forward all of their savings to the group's bank account, which, of course, I used to finance my lavish lifestyle. Additionally, ex-members who were able to escape my grasp denounced Love Has Won as a cult, and the families of those who couldn't or wouldn't leave made countless reports to the authorities, stating that their loved ones were the victims of brainwashing and fraud. In May of 2022, one member of the group was even found staggering through the Australian wilderness disoriented, dehydrated, and not wearing any clothes. Apparently, I and my followers had banished this member, accusing him of lacking the right energy and of being on the wrong side of the mountain. However, this follower could hardly see where he was walking since staring into the sun had severely blurred his vision. Even after being treated, he was still convinced that he had ascended into the world of the 5D Matrix. Even today, his family is still helping him recover. In August 2022, I flew myself and my followers out to the island of Kauai in Hawaii, where they set up their new base of operations. The locals quickly turned hostile when I proclaimed myself to be the Hawaiian goddess. Nevertheless, protests and demonstrations ensued, with the islanders demanding that Love Has Won must leave and never return. Additionally, eggs and rocks were thrown at our residents and vehicles. Things became so heated that the mayor of Kauai himself had to negotiate the group's departure from the island. Just 1 month after arriving, Love Has Won was effectively chased off Kauai, and we returned to Australia in September. That same month, the group announced that their leader, 45-year-old Mama G, had lost the use of her legs and was slowly withering away. Yeah, that was me. Honestly, I wouldn't know if I was old. I was still very much young, but I was old in spirit. I was last seen by a member of the general public on April 10th, 2023. On April 28th, a chilling discovery was made when the authorities received a call from none other than Nick Aiden, my first devoted member and financial guru. He told them that I was dead and that when he had found my body, my brainwashed followers refused to let him or his son leave the compound. The call was a big surprise, though. Yeah, I was sick and very weak, but I wasn't dead. Nick had probably given up all hope of my healing back. Now this is where the trouble all started. Initially, when we started the Dark Power online, we were asked to create a website for the cult. The rule was that we should always perform some blood ritual to renew my lifespan and probably make me younger than my age. So after the rituals, it must be uploaded somewhere on the site. And every month, all I had to do was open the site, do some incantations, and perform the blood renewal ritual. Unfortunately, last month, Nick and I were about to do the monthly ritual, but when we logged into the site, it was gone. It was like it didn't even exist at all. We tried all we could to recover all the files from the website, because that was what was needed to complete the full ritual. It was taking forever, as we just couldn't get back to the site, and that was the cause of my sickness. I really don't know what my fate will be by next month, but all my ritual files, photos, and videos are gone. Story 4. Lost files that are better left unseen. I was only 19 years old at the time, and it was long after midnight at this point. My name is Amelia Allen, and my boyfriend, Ambrose James, was spending time in the motel room where we currently reside. On this particular day, there is nothing wrong with the world, and some people could even consider it to be unbearably ordinary. After assuring me that he would be back in the morning, Ambrose left at 10 o'clock at night. So I went to bed and my night ended because it was extremely brief. It was morning, and my lover Ambrose was nowhere to be found. I was really concerned. As a result, I didn't give it much thought, and continued with my usual routine of going about my everyday life and working. After 3 days, I was at my place of work when I got a phone call from someone. It turned out to be a man, and he was aware of Ambrose's whereabouts. He claimed that he was involved in a shooting, and that he would not be returning home due to the incident. I was so shocked that I informed my supervisor that I needed to go, and given the circumstances, I was granted permission to leave earlier than I had planned. I left the building and went into the parking lot in a few moments. I had no idea what to do, but I had to move quickly. Because I was being distracted by the string of notifications that were coming on my phone, I decided to bring out my phone. It was just as the caller had described it. When I clicked on one of them, I was presented with photographs and videos of my partner that were available on the internet. In contrast, things were different this time. He was tied to a chair, and while the video recording was going on, they slain his throat. At first, I was skeptical because his face had transformed entirely, most likely as a result of the severe beating he received, which had a deforming effect on his appearance and face. The truth was that I was utterly broken, but I was too weak to figure out what to do about it. I crossed paths with a man while I was strolling along the road. Before I ended up getting into his car, we had a little conversation. Almost immediately after that, the man got into his vehicle, and it sped off, but I was never to be seen again. That was the last time my family and friends heard of me. I was kidnapped and drugged by this stranger. Instantaneously, I was rendered unconscious upon entering the vehicle, and after I had regained some consciousness, I became aware of voices. During the conversation, the man who initially carried me said, "If you go along with us and cooperate with us, we will be as nice to you as we possibly can within the confines of keeping you a prisoner. They are going to take you into the bed and tie you down if you do not comply with our request." A man known as Phil Lame was born in San Francisco, California, on October 29th, 1989. His early years were quite frank, even though he was considered a clever child. However, when Phil turned 6, his parents divorced, and he and his brothers moved in with their grandmother. This occurred after Phil's parents split. Surprisingly, Phil started engaging in unsettling behaviors. On other occasions, he was discovered taking photographs of his sister in her underwear. The fact that he would gather mice and dissolve them in chemicals, as well as the fact that he would blackmail his brothers into performing sexual acts, were all things that his grandmother would approve of, and she would not make even the slightest effort to put a stop to it. Phil came from an abusive family, which served to further stoke his dark fascinations. Phil Lame's life, on the other hand, would only continue to spiral further and farther as time began to take control of him. This was because they were not monitored and were frequently encouraged. At the turn of the 1990s and throughout his adult life, Phil Lame developed a strong interest in survivalism, a movement emphasizing the importance of being prepared for extreme catastrophes. Notably, Phil was utterly terrified of a nuclear apocalypse and tried multiple times to construct safety bunkers at his home with differing degrees of success. In 1991, he wrote an advertisement for a survivalist companion and published it in a war game magazine. He did this to find someone to live with him for reasons that, to tell you the truth, only God knows why. This single page, this one advertisement, had led Phil to encounter one of the most horrible persons in existence, which had exacerbated Phil's previous morbid fantasies and led to his status as one of the most filthy and unsettling creatures that had ever been. The man's name was Chung Hao, and he was a convicted felon who had been in and out of prison. He was originally from Hong Kong. Almost soon, the two individuals became friends and began working together to commit several crimes, including the theft of firearms, which ultimately resulted in their arrest and a brief period of incarceration. In the aftermath of their escape, the two individuals made their home in a town called Wilseyville, which is located in the woods. It was in this town that Phil enlisted the assistance of a number of locals in order to construct yet another bunker directly next to his cabin. Inside, he started amassing illicit firearms in his possession. However, there was something that was not quite where it should have been alongside them. It consisted of apparatus for recording video. A hidden component of the building, which can be referred to as a secret chamber, a dwelling, or a cell, was the primary focus of the video recording that he provided. He stated that the entire rationale for the building's expense and its work would be a hidden portion of the building. The confinement of a young lady, who is most likely unknown to him at this very moment, will be the primary goal of the structure, as well as the purpose of that particular cell. Apparently, he discussed the reasons why he needed the facility in the first place. I am looking for a sex companion that is ready to go. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired, satiated, bored, or not interested, I just want to put her away, lock her up in a small room, and get her out of my sight and out of my life. It would appear that this film was widely shared over the internet, and it came with the tag House of Horror. First, his victims were taken captive, and then they were plundered, raped, and murdered. There were 12 innocent victims. Meanwhile, his bunker was not built primarily for the purpose of survivalism. Rather, it was only a component of his overall survival strategy. You have to understand that Phil and Cheng had a deep-seated preoccupation with capturing. Phil asserted that he required them to serve him after the nuclear holocaust that was about to occur, and he routinely went on record to completely degrade the existence of women. In this manner, Phil and Cheng would spend years capturing and torturing individuals inside the bunker, all the while photographing their actions on the several VHS cameras that were installed inside each chamber. The next victim wasn't just someone random, because it was me, Amelia Allen, at the time when I left my job because of the news of my boyfriend's death or kidnapping. Yeah, I can't tell my boyfriend's true story now because I'm still fighting for my survival. I was the woman who entered a stranger's car and was never seen again. I fell right into the grasp of Phil Lame. While the pair's main target was women, they wouldn't hold back on abducting their relatives. Before they would rob them, strangle them, and steal their identities, the couple would frequently force men to come out to their bunker in the expectation that they would find work. Following this, they would use their families as a means of intimidation to visit their property, just as they had done with me. Once they arrived, they would lock their family up in Phil's dungeon and give them an ultimatum when they returned. On the other hand, we have the option of serving Phil and Cheng without any remorse and obeying each and every command they issue without any hesitation, or they might choose to kill us. However, regardless of which choice they made, The reality was that the outcome would be the same. Their lives would be cruelly taken away from them, and there would be no one around to offer assistance. In June 1995, police were called to a hardware store when Chung Hao was discovered attempting to shoplift a vice. As soon as Phil became aware of the issue, he made his way there promptly, expecting to pay for it personally. On the other hand, when the authorities asked for identification, he handed over a document that did not resemble him. It turned out to be the driver's license of a different person, a man who had been reported missing only a few weeks earlier. In the aftermath, Chung and Phil were taken into custody. Nevertheless, just 4 days later, while he was being held in detention, Phil Lame killed himself by ingesting cyanide pills. During the search of Phil's property, the authorities found several cars that belonged to their countless victims, as well as the makeshift burial site that was located next to their compound. A total of 40 pounds of crushed human bone pieces were discovered inside of it. These fragments are believed to have originated from the remains of at least 11 different people. When they enter the bunker, they find a treasure map that leads to 2 buckets that contain a variety of identification documents and personal possessions, as well as a large number of VHS videos that depict the torture and murder of their victims. It would be a criminal understatement to suggest that their discovery was dismal, because the scope of their misdeeds just cannot be summed up on paper. It was a bizarre situation, and the content of those VHS tapes was even more terrible than I could have imagined. In the present day, Chung Hao is still alive and carrying out his sentence of life imprisonment at the San Quentin State Prison. Because he was found guilty of 12 charges of first-degree murder by the court, it is difficult to deny that this individual will never again be seen in public. The fact that he and Phil Lame recorded the crimes they perpetrated adds an additional dimension of aversion to the situation. The crimes they committed are among the most heinous in the history of the world, and that was how I was rescued by the authorities, but I was very traumatized about the whole incident. Luckily, I came out alive. The tapes that were filmed by Chung Hao and Phil Lame are still securely stored away, and there are no intentions to ever make them available to the public. On the other hand, taking into account the content that is supposed to be on them, it is safe to say that there are some videos and files that would be better off being lost forever. Story 5. Where are you? I used to enjoy staying up late in my room listening to the radio on a boombox that had an integrated tape recorder. This was around the year 1995 when I was approximately 15 years old. I stumbled on this one night. It's possible that I didn't catch the beginning of the broadcast, but I did see a significant portion of it. Announcing that the station I was listening to was Speed 89.9 New York, the announcer adds this right at the very conclusion of the program. Even though it had a large number of names and dates, I have never encountered anything else that is comparable to this. There is a relic from the past in the history of the internet known as the creepypasta. Many of us were introduced to the horror that may be found online. Among the most well-known horror stories that can be found on the internet, some of the more notorious ones include Suicide Mouse, Ben Drowned, Slender Man, and Sad Satan. But even now, there is one person who refuses to die. Jeff the Killer is the name. At this point, he does not require an introduction. In all honesty, the narrative that is being told today has not precisely aged very well. And to tell you the truth, it sounds a little bit like Joker fan fiction. And it isn't that terrifying. However, this is acceptable because it wasn't really written in our time. But even though it is a story that has outlived its relevance, Jeff the Killer is still considered to be a significant part of the history of the internet. It is safe to assume that the uncanny nature of the image that accompanied the story was the primary factor that contributed to its success on the internet. Throughout the early 2010s, the image spread like wildfire, but the majority of people were unaware that it had coincidentally gotten itself entangled in a web of controversy and an ongoing mystery, and that it was all based on a single straightforward question. As we know it, the narrative was written by a user on the Creepypasta wiki who goes by the handle GameFuel2000. The oldest date known to have been published for the story is November 21st, 2011. In a peculiar turn of events, however, A user on the internet, who goes by the name Cesur, came forward not long after the online explosion of the website, asserting that, in truth, they were the person who created Jeff. Even though this is a big claim, it should be relatively simple to confirm. On October 3, 2008, a video was uploaded to a YouTube account operating under the username Killer Jeff. Cesur asserts that he is the proprietor of this channel. The film is more or less a slideshow, and it sprinkles parts of Jeff the Killer lore over photographs of various characters from his story throughout the presentation. It is interesting to note that a tale accompanied this upload on Newgrounds, posted by the same person on August 10th of the same year. According to the tale of Old Jeffy, he is a fan of horror flicks and ghost stories, among other types of horror. Do you have any personal experience with him?
Yeah.
This individual is what other people would describe as being strange. The only difference is that he must conduct it in the closet, turn off all the lights, and sit down cross-legged while repeating the statement 3 times and turning your head back and forth. He is more like a Bloody Mary game than anything else possible. Just say, "He is in here with me." After the phrase, close your eyes and say, "Jeff." He will make his appearance by putting his face directly in front of you, and then he will begin to shout and attempt to bring harm upon you. It is necessary to stand there and commend him to get him to stop, and failing to do so will result in a field trip that is a nightmare. Let's say that's all there is to it. Because they contain evidence of the earliest incarnation exploiting his name and image, Cesur is responsible for creating Jeff the Killer. Considering all of this, do you think they need to have that picture without editing? An additional creator named Scare Theater reached out to Cesur throughout December 2015. Many queries such as, "What inspired you?" were among the many questions that was posed to him. Why do you refer to him as Jeff? And did you ever anticipate that he would become so well known? These things provide a thought-provoking look into the person who created this massive online platform. Interestingly, in one of them, Scare Theater presses Cesur about the origins of the Jeff image, and they react by saying, "The picture was made using a white latex mask and some big plastic eyes with red rubber substance that simulated blinking. In addition, a dark ring surrounded the eyes and covered the red eyelid, which was revealed entirely. Following its creation, 2 or 3 photographs were taken, and the rest, as they say, is history. Therefore, the riddle was answered in a single swift motion." Using nothing more than a rubber mask and some false eyes, Cesur created something that terrified millions of people online. In a short amount of time following the interview with Cesur, a video was discovered on a YouTube account known as Darky Night T. NNN Special Broadcast is the name of the video that was uploaded on August 2nd, 2007. It is based on a Japanese urban legend involving a scrolling list of names that occurs at approximately 3 in the morning when no one should be watching. It is reported that horrifying images and strange sounds accompany the list, and that at the very end, it proclaims that these names are the sacrifices that will be made tomorrow. Nevertheless, if I've ever seen it, it is clearly some stuff that is associated with Local 58. As you can see, Darky Knight manages to slip in a minor surprise right at the end of this movie, which completely flips all that we thought we knew about Jeff the Killer. At this location, it was discovered that Cesur was a counterfeiter. Even though everyone took his promise at face value, he lied. In addition to this, it is quite possible that the image of Jeff, the killer, did not even come from our region of the world, as evidence from a website unaware of the situation began to emerge over the following months. What was the original version of this image like? And did it come from where it was initially taken? There was likely to be more information on Jeff the Killer out there if he were to be concealed within this tape, which has been sitting here since 2007 and is unknown to the entire world with the potential to be discovered. By 2018, detectives had made their way to a Japanese discussion board known as PIA CC, which had since been taken down. This is a typical website that includes blog postings and online discussions. It is everything you would expect. On the other hand, he was once again present in 2005, concealed within a message that was otherwise harmless and relatively obscure. On November 15th, a user named Omega Bolt decided to submit the photograph to the internet. However, any communication with them has been absent up to this point. They have vanished from the face of the world. effectively becoming as opaque as Jeff's origin itself. Aside from that, however, this revelation was not at all a dead end because, after being processed through an XEF data analyzer, it was discovered that the file name of this photograph is Pretty Face. Interestingly, they discovered him again only a few weeks after the initial discovery. With the discovery of white powder, too, an alternative version of Jeff the Killer, less altered than the original, was discovered for the first time. It was posted by a user named Meister Mulholland, and in their version, they could make up minute features that Photoshop would have otherwise obscured. It is no longer the case that the mouth is twisted, the facial accents have disappeared, and the eyes that were before menacing have been replaced with an alternative. On the other hand, in contrast to Omega Bolt, Mr. Mulholland was located and contacted through Twitter. At that location, they asserted that they had witnessed the image before its editing, and that, to their knowledge, it originated from a video uploaded on the internet, depicting an Asian woman inside her home. Reportedly, her face was incredibly pale, and in the middle of the 2000s, lightly modified screen captures of her were circulated as surprise photographs on Japanese message boards. They go on to say that they do not possess the original image, that they are under the impression that it is no longer available on the internet, and that they suspect that it may have originated from a television program called Honto Niata Noroi no Video. Since this discovery, every episode produced between 1999 and 2005 has been exhaustively searched, but a single match has never been discovered. However, there is one more sighting of Jeff the Killer, which is still considered the oldest sighting today. The first version, taken on July 24, 2005, was displayed on the homepage of Fileman, N1EJP, where it was tucked away inconspicuously among pictures of waifus and puppies. Fear of a Summer Night is the lone hint that accompanied this photo. And once clicked, a descriptor indicates that this snapshot is a statement from a celebrity before plastic surgery. Fear of a Summer Night. Aside from this, no additional context is provided. I could spend the entire day doing this because, ever since the hunt began, there have been hundreds of sightings of Jeff the Killer online, all of which predate Sissur's initial story. Throughout the years, there have been quite a few original image competitors that have garnered substantial support. The hoax involving a woman who does not exist has been the most prominent example of this phenomenon. Although it is safe to assume that this rise has been met with a certain amount of criticism, the determined efforts of those trying to explore this for a decade have not been held down by this. This is one of the internet mysteries that has been going on for the longest time and may never be solved. Even though other versions of Jeff have been found, they have undergone a far greater number of alterations than the initial version. In other words, there are speculations that it is a photo that is part of a set of 3, but there has never been any evidence to support this claim. This is even though people with excessive spare time are constructing their own version of the original image and passing it off as a genuine article. Occasionally, the existence of a mystery that has stood the test of time brings about a lifelong obsession. When it comes to subjects that appear to be unsolvable, particularly in this day and age, there is something strangely appealing about them. In a perfect world, the existence of the internet should be a sign that all mysterious things have been eradicated. This is because, at a moment's notice, any activity that takes place on this globe should, in theory, have some response that is easily accessible. Additionally, I am relieved that this is not the case, since Jeff the Killer has provided the contemporary internet with a little degree of perplexing fascination because it is predicated on a topic that is so straightforward. However, to this day, the person who took this photograph has never come forward. It is the creation of someone who knows someone who took this photograph. The problem may be a language barrier. It is possible that they have passed away, or that they are living under a rock, and that they are entirely unaware of the fact that the simple image they snapped on a random day before 2005 is now the topic of one of the most extensive internet searches in recent history. Regardless of where this person is, Jeff the Killer, in some capacity, has stood the test of time, and whether his identity has ever actually been found, he will forever remain embedded within an online conversation, always regarded in enigmatic paradox, effectively immortalized as one of the most recognizable, yet completely unknown internet urban legends ever to exist. Well, there are some lost files or media you just wish you could find and learn more about, while there are some you don't want to ever see and wish was lost forever. I was indeed fascinated by the story of Jeff the Killer, and I was grateful I listened to my radio recorder when the exact time they talked about this issue. What is your story like? Have you ever come across some information and disturbing videos that all of a sudden vanish totally? Let us know in the comment section below. We would love to hear from you. So what are you waiting for? Why not check out any of our videos displayed on your screen now? Just a click. See you in our next video.